Good morning and welcome to another episode of OT Investigates. In today's episode we're going to be looking at the sort of second part in the series on the next expansion book, the sort of Last Alliance expansion book that I've been designing. We're going to be looking at 2 Legendary Legions today. So, the first of the 2 Legendary Legions. Now, it's quite tricky to actually find, you'd squeeze 6 Legendary Legions out of this book. No, I've managed 6, that's a lie. And for some of them, I've had to imagine or use some stuff from Unfinished Tales and try and read into them a bit to create, something that would make sense as a Legendary Legion. So the first one is probably not one you will have heard of unless you're quite into the lore. It's the Defenders of Minas Ithil. This is Minas Morgul before it is taken over by the Witch King. So this is basically Isildur defending Minas Ithil from the forces of Sauron. He's kind of the only hero there initially, and it's him and just his warriors and his personal guard basically. So I've tried to create a legion to reflect that sort of defensive aspect and relying on Isildur. So what you can see on the screen in front of you now is the unit list. That's all you can take. Worth noting at this point, Isildur won't have the ring, but I have said you can take horse, shield and all that good stuff. The armor composition, you must take Isildur. He must also be your army's leader. I hope this kind of makes sense. He's kind of the big hero in this situation, and he's kind of leading the defense of Minas Ithil. The rules are obviously where these legendaries get more interesting. The first rule is the White Tree. So this is the precursor to the White Tree of Gondor, and basically it was kind of an integral symbol of that defense. So at the beginning of the game, you can place a 25mm token anywhere on the board outside of both players' deployment zones. If it's not possible, if you're playing in a scenario where the deployment zones go right up to the middle, it has to be placed outside of your opponent's deployment zone, but it can then be in your deployment zone. So ideally not in either, but if that's not possible, it has to be at least outside of your opponent's deployment zone. Whilst within 6 inches of this token, warrior models, not hero models, warrior models in this army gain +1 to their fight value and do not back away if they lose a fight. So basically, this is that last-ditch defense around the White Tree, trying to hold as desperately as they can and not lose that city. Second rule is desperate defense. All models in the army against will protect Isildur. However, should Isildur be slain, the army counts broken to as such. So Isildur again leading that defense, really integral to it. While he is alive and they still have that White Tree to defend, they're going to be really brave, but if he does flee, then the defense might fall and the city might fall as well. And Isildur in this moment is obviously quite heroic, so I've kind of given him that Lord of the West style rule, so he can reroll 1 dice in the dual roll and 1 dice when rolling to wound. So this would kind of pivot entirely around Isildur. I think it would be quite a tricky list to run, because you lose out on the Numenor army bonus as well, but you do get quite a lot in return. Obviously no allies and stuff like that. So yeah, it would be quite an interesting list to run and would be very reliant on, that fight 5 from the White Tree in the middle, keeping you alive. The next Legendary Legion is one of the most complicated things I've ever had a go at on this channel, and I don't know how well it will come across for you. It is the host at Dagorlad. Now, these are the plains in front of Barad-dûr, and this is where, all the forces of good mustered to go and attack Sauron. There were 5 different armies supposedly represented at this host, and if you watched the previous video, you probably have guessed what 2 of them are going to be already, and you can probably imagine what the other 3 are going to be as well. I'm going to begin by showing you, it's probably been on the screen for a while now, the ones you would expect. In sort of dark blue, there is the Numenor host, that's what you can take, and on the right hand side there is the Rivendell host, again you can see on the right hand side. Now, there are obviously other heroes you could include, I think you could very easily put Glorfindel in there. I opted not to because I kind of wanted it to theme a bit more around the films and stuff like that, but yeah, there's arguments both ways. These are, I think, the heroes who are definitely there. So Elendil was definitely there, Anarion was definitely there, Isildur was definitely there, Gil-galad was definitely there, Elrond was definitely there, and Círdan was definitely there. I've given them options, so they can take warriors and knights, basically. And yeah, that's just a fairly standard Rivendell list. The interesting stuff is going to come on the next page here. So, in the green is the Greenwood host, in the gold, sort of goldy yellow, is the Lorien host, and on the red is the Khazad-dûm host. Now, I'll start with the Greenwood host. Basically, for the Greenwood and the Lorien host, they arrived to try and assist, however, they were not very well equipped. This is something that's gone across in the lore. They were basically poorly equipped for war, and they charged in very recklessly, and you'll see it reflected in a second. Basically, Orifer was kind of the leader of the whole thing, and then Amdir brought his troops along as well. You can take sort of the most basic options from both of them. Now, the Greenwood host is based around the Mirkwood faction. So it uses the Mirkwood warriors, the Mirkwood captains, and the Mirkwood knights. Same with the Lorien host. The Lorien host uses the Lothlorien captain, the Lothlorien warrior, and the Lothlorien knight. So you can just you literally would. The idea is a bit like with the Erebor legions in Defense of the North. You could literally take those models and just use them in these armies. So they would gain a new keyword, but you could use the same models, and you wouldn't then need to design an entire new plastic kit just to represent these two factions. So yeah, the Greenwood host is Thranduil's from The Hobbit, if you want to imagine it like that, and the Lorien host is just based around Lothlorien, so you could use those models in place. So yeah, you can bring a small contingent from Khazad-dûm with the King's Champion, the Dwarf Rangers and the Iron Guards. So they're kind of there just like the scouts, the sort of lighter troops that would travel over from Khazad-dûm. Also, looking at the army composition, this one is quite complicated because it's quite a complicated force. You have to take one of Gil-galad or Elendil to represent that theme of the kings of both of Numenor and the Noldor. And then you have to take at least one Greenwood or Lorien warband with at least 12 models. So you can't just take like a token hero or whatever, a token few troops. And you have to take at least one Rivendell or Numenor warband with at least 12 models. Again, so trying to make you take it in as themey a way as possible while still making it possible to build the list. And you can also take that one Khazad-dûm warband. So, the rules. The Last Alliance. All models in this army get +1 courage. That sort of animosity style bonus, it's not that for this obviously, but if they have different faction keywords in the same combat, they reroll to wound rolls of 1. I messed around with this a lot. It was originally +1 strength, and then it became +1 to wound, which I think would be way too good. +1 strength is maybe okay. I was a bit wary of +1 fight because you're getting basic fight 6 warriors, which is probably a bit much. But basically, as long as they have any two keywords, different keywords in the same fight, they're going to reroll to wound rolls of 1. I think this would be good enough. Next rule, Heroes of Legend. This is a bit like the Lord of the West ability. Basically, every hero specifically becomes fearless and gains +1 to their fight value. Different, you would declare this at the start of the move phase before priorities are rolled, and that would basically mean you pass all courage tests that turn, and you get +1 to your fight value. The next thing, ill-equipped for war. This is why maybe taking the Greenwood and Lorien is a little bit of a nerf. You can only equip one additional item of war gear. So basically they arrive kind of poorly equipped for war and then charged in kind of recklessly against the orders of Gil-galad. So they were not in a position to really help that much in this battle. Additionally, their weapons do not count as elven made. So yeah, don't have the same level of equipment as the Noldor. They're not quite as well equipped, but they still do. They are good fighters in their own right. They just weren't as well equipped. Also, reckless courage, so they have to charge if they're able to, but the bonus is they automatically pass tests for charging a terror-causing enemy. So kind of a nerf, kind of a buff in that sense for them as well. So yeah, this would kind of represent a kind of quite mixed host with, maybe not all working together entirely collectively for that end goal, but it would be quite cool, and you do get some nice bonuses in there as well with the different faction keywords, and getting that nice bonus of Turing rolls of 1 would be really good. Cool, hopefully all that made sense. The host of Dagorlad I appreciate is quite complicated, and there's definitely loads of different ways you could go for it, but I think that was sort of my best shot at representing it in quite a themey way without making it very OP. Again, if you do have any suggestions, absolutely chuck them down in the comments below, and I'm happy to read through those. But yeah, looking forward to see you for the next video where we go through the next 2 Legendary Legions.